In the heart of a gleaming modern condominium complex known as the Regency Residences, where the polished marble floors and pristine corridors masked the simmering absurdities of everyday life, our unlikely hero John lived a life that many would call ordinary, if not for the fact that his ordinary life was about to take a detour straight into the realm of the absurd. John was the sort of man who believed that fairness and respect weren't just quaint ideals for bedtime stories, but the very principles that should guide every interaction in a civilized society. Every morning, as the sun's first light danced on the shiny surfaces of his hallway, John would recite a silent vow to uphold these ideals, never expecting that fate would soon lead him into a battle against a nemesis as bizarre as she was infuriating. Enter Karen, a name that, in this tale, was less a personal identifier and more a title bestowed upon the self-crowned queen of everything. Karen wasn't your average neighbor. She was a connoisseur of entitlement, a virtuoso of self-importance, and an unapologetic enthusiast for commandeering anything that wasn't explicitly marked as her own. In the corridors of the Regency Residences, her reputation was as infamous as a viral meme. With a perfectly coiffed hairdo and an expression that could curdle fresh milk, Karen strutted through the building with the air of someone who believed the universe revolved solely around her whims. John's troubles began subtly enough. At first, it was merely a series of mysterious vanishings. A package here, a carefully wrapped parcel there. These weren't just any packages. They were the kind that one eagerly awaited, a collection of prized possessions ranging from limited edition tech gadgets to gourmet treats, all arriving with the promise of convenience and delight. Yet, over the course of a few weeks, John noticed that these parcels, like pieces of a puzzle, were disappearing without a trace. The building's management, tightly controlled by the HOA, Homeowners Association, under Karen's unyielding oversight, offered little comfort. Their explanation? It must be a case of mistaken delivery, but John knew better. The first time John caught a glimpse of the culprit, it was in the dim glow of the hallway's security light. There she was, Karen, her hands clutching what appeared to be a package, her face lit by a mischievous glimmer. In that moment, John's suspicions crystallized into a painful, satirical epiphany. The very embodiment of privilege and self-obsession was pilfering what wasn't hers, all under the nose of an apathetic management system. One could almost hear the sarcastic fanfare of a trumpeting brass band in the background as John's mind spun with the bitter irony of it all. Determined to uncover the full extent of this absurdity, John embarked on a covert investigation. He began documenting the disappearances with the meticulous care of a detective in a low-budget noir film, albeit one with a decidedly modern twist. Armed with nothing more than a smartphone, a notebook, and a dash of righteous indignation, John observed the peculiar habits of his neighbor. Karen, ever the opportunist, was seen hovering around the package delivery area at odd hours, her gloved hands snatching parcels with a furtive, almost artful grace. It was as if she were curating a personal collection of borrowed goods, a collection that, in her mind, must have been rightfully hers by some convoluted law of entitlement. The situation was made all the more farcical by the fact that the HOA's rigid policies and bureaucratic inertia created the perfect backdrop for Karen's antics. While John watched helplessly as his cherished deliveries disappeared one by one, the association's meetings were filled with Karen's bombastic declarations about community standards and resident responsibilities, all carefully crafted to deflect any blame from her own questionable behavior. To John, it was as though the entire building was a stage, and Karen was performing a one-woman show in which she was both the villain and the unsuspecting hero of her own self-serving narrative. But what truly made the situation unbearable, and darkly comical in its own right, was the sheer audacity of Karen's actions. With each package that vanished, John's frustration grew, morphing into a simmering cocktail of disbelief and a burning desire for justice. He couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. A modern-day Robin Hood, except in reverse. A thief who didn't steal from the rich to give to the poor, but rather stole from the unsuspecting and flaunted her conquests like trophies at a self-appointed gallery of magnificence. As days turned into weeks, the mysterious case of the disappearing packages became the talk of the building. Residents whispered in hallways and over coffee at the building's common lounge, their conversations laced with incredulity and a touch of amusement. Some even speculated that Karen's thefts were part of an elaborate performance art piece designed to critique the very notion of ownership in contemporary society. Others believed it was a sinister power play, a calculated move in a high-stakes game of suburban one-upmanship. Regardless of the true motive, the end result was the same. John was left with a burning need to restore balance, to reclaim what was rightfully his, and to ensure that Karen's reign of entitlement would not go unchallenged. This is where our story takes its first darkly humorous twist. Picture John, the mild-mannered, justice-seeking everyman, armed only with his wits and an indomitable sense of fairness, pitted against a neighbor whose narcissism was as boundless as her capacity for mischief. It was the kind of situation that could only be described as ripe for a satirical revenge tale, one where the underdog not only faces off against overwhelming odds but also delivers a lesson in humility, all with a hearty dose of absurdity. As John sat in his modest apartment, surrounded by stacks of missing package reports and a growing collection of odd observations, he couldn't help but reflect on the state of modern society. In an era when self-promotion and entitlement were often rewarded, the fact that someone like Karen could casually exploit the very systems meant to protect communal harmony was both a tragedy and a farce. Yet, beneath the layers of satire and scorn, there lay a burning determination, a resolve to stand up against the tide of apathy and to make sure that justice, however unconventional its methods, would prevail. And so, as the building hummed along with its daily routine and Karen continued her capers with an air of imperious nonchalance, John's inner monologue began to shift. No longer would he be a passive observer in this theater of the absurd. Instead, he vowed to turn the tables, to weave a narrative of revenge that would not only reclaim his lost treasures, but also expose the ridiculousness of a system that allowed such shameless audacity to flourish. In that moment, amid the hum of the elevator and the chatter of fellow residents, the seeds of retribution were sown. John's investigation into the mysterious vanishing of his precious packages had quickly evolved from a mild inconvenience into an epic saga of suburban absurdity. It all started when he noticed that his doorbell had become the unwitting herald of a disappearing act that would have made Houdini proud. Every time he eagerly anticipated a delivery, from limited edition tech gadgets to gourmet artisanal treats, he was instead met with an empty doorstep and an inexplicable absence of his treasures. At first, John chalked it up to a mere logistical hiccup, perhaps an error in the delivery system or an overzealous mail carrier with a penchant for mischief. But as the incidents mounted, a pattern began to emerge, and whispers of an unusual phenomenon circulated among the residents of the Regency residences. The building's corridors, normally a bastion of polite nods and quick greetings, became the stage for a peculiar drama that no one could ignore. The gossip began innocuously enough at the communal coffee station, where residents shared incredulous looks over their morning brews. "Did you see John's package last week?" one tenant would ask, lowering their voice as if the mere mention might summon some dark force. The theories ranged from the plausible to the downright absurd. Some speculated that a phantom thief was haunting the lobby, while others joked that the building itself was playing tricks on its inhabitants. Yet, amid all this speculation, one name kept resurfacing in hushed, knowing tones. Karen. Karen, with her immaculate coiffure and an expression that screamed, "I'm always right," had long been a fixture of the Regency residences. Her reputation for wielding her self-appointed authority like a scepter was legendary. To the uninitiated, Karen might have appeared to be merely a woman with a strong personality. But to those who truly observed her, it was clear that she was an opportunist with a flair for the dramatic. She moved through the building with an air of entitlement, as if every package delivered was somehow destined for her personal collection. The breakthrough in John's investigation came on a chilly autumn evening. Determined to catch the phantom culprit in the act, John had staked out the corridor near the package delivery area. Hidden behind a potted plant, an admittedly poor choice of camouflage given its bright, cheery blooms, he kept his eyes peeled for any unusual activity. It wasn't long before the spectacle unfolded. There, in the muted glow of the hallway's security light, was Karen. With an almost balletic grace, she glided down the hall, her arms wrapped tightly around what appeared to be a freshly delivered package. Her expression was one of smug satisfaction, a silent declaration that she had successfully claimed another prize. The scene struck John like a lightning bolt of absurdity. The package, wrapped in the standard brown paper and twine, looked as ordinary as any other. Yet, in Karen's hands, it transformed into a symbol of her unyielding hubris. In that moment, John's mind whirled with a cocktail of indignation and incredulity. Here was the woman who had, time and again, brazenly appropriated his deliveries, now caught in the act as if she were performing in her very own one-woman parade of entitlement. Over the ensuing days, John embarked on a covert operation to document these peculiar thefts. Armed with his smartphone and a notebook filled with detailed observations, he became a veritable suburban detective. Every time he spotted Karen near the package area, he discreetly recorded the moment, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and righteous fury. The recordings, though grainy, provided undeniable evidence. Karen was indeed the mastermind behind the great package heists. The plot thickened as more residents began to take notice. The building's residents, initially divided between disbelief and amusement, soon found themselves drawn into the unfolding drama. Informal meetings took place in the elevator and the laundry room, where snippets of evidence were exchanged like priceless artifacts in a heist movie. One resident, with a theatrical flourish, even declared that Karen's actions were a bold statement against the tyranny of societal norms. A comment that was met with laughter and eye rolls in equal measure. Yet, for all the humor and theatrics, there was an undeniable undercurrent of betrayal. John's packages weren't just objects. They were tokens of trust in a system that promised reliability and fairness. With every missing delivery, that trust eroded a little further, replaced by a bitter sense of injustice. It was as if Karen's relentless antics were a deliberate provocation, a way to highlight the absurdity of a system that allowed such blatant disregard for communal property. One evening, the tension reached its peak. It was past midnight, and the corridors of the Regency residences lay cloaked in silence. John, driven by a mix of determination and exasperation, decided to conduct one final stakeout. Hidden in the shadows near the elevator, he waited with bated breath, his eyes scanning every inch of the dimly lit hallway. It was then that he witnessed a scene so shockingly brazen that it would be etched in his memory forever. Karen appeared, moving with the stealth of a cat burglar despite her usual air of pompousness. Clutched in her gloved hands was a package that glowed under the harsh light of a flickering hallway lamp. Her eyes, glinting with a mixture of triumph and mischief, darted around to ensure she wasn't caught. For a brief, suspended moment, time seemed to slow. John's heart pounded in his chest as he observed the scene. The gravity of the moment balanced precariously with the absurdity of it all. There was an almost cinematic quality to the encounter. Karen's every movement was deliberate and graceful, as if she were performing a well-rehearsed routine. The package itself, ordinary as it might seem to an untrained eye, had become a metaphor for the stolen dignity of the building's residents. And in that charged moment, the stakes of this suburban caper were laid bare. It wasn't merely about packages. It was about the audacity to flaunt entitlement in a community that had silently endured her misdeeds for far too long. John's shock quickly gave way to a surge of resolve. The evidence was irrefutable, and the shock of witnessing Karen's brazen act only cemented his determination to reclaim what was rightfully his, and, by extension, restore the balance in their shared community. The absurdity of the situation was almost too much to bear, yet it fueled a fire within him. Here was a woman so consumed by her self-importance that she believed the universe should yield to her whims without question. And now, she had been caught red-handed. A moment of undeniable clarity that would serve as the catalyst for the next chapter in this twisted tale of revenge. As the night drew on, John retreated to his apartment, his mind swirling with the implications of what he had witnessed. He reviewed the recordings, scrutinizing every detail, every gesture that betrayed Karen's smug satisfaction. The evidence, meticulously collected over days of covert surveillance, painted a picture of a woman who was not just a petty thief but a symbol of everything that was wrong with a society that rewarded entitlement over decency. The corridors of the Regency residences, once a quiet backdrop to everyday life, had now become a battleground for a farcical yet potent struggle. The residents, initially mere bystanders to this unfolding drama, were now united in a silent chorus of indignation. The air was thick with anticipation, each resident waiting for the inevitable reckoning, each hoping that the scales of justice might finally tip in their favor. In this phase of the story, the narrative had shifted from petty package thefts to a full-blown, surreal confrontation between the forces of order and chaos. Karen's actions, while laughably absurd, had struck a nerve, challenging the very fabric of the communal trust that the residents had taken for granted. And as John meticulously documented every detail, it became clear that this was not merely a personal vendetta but a microcosm of a broader societal commentary, a satire on the ridiculousness of unchecked entitlement and the absurdity of a system that allowed it to flourish. The building's corridors, once mundane and indifferent, had transformed into the stage for this outrageous performance art, a performance that would soon reach its crescendo, with John poised to exact a revenge that was as humorous as it was retributive. Karen's every theft was a slap in the face of common decency, and her unrepentant demeanor was the final straw that propelled John to take action. John's plan was as deviously simple as it was outrageously effective. He wasn't going to confront Karen head-on. No, that would be too pedestrian. Instead, he'd employ an unlikely ally, a skunk. Yes, a skunk. But not just any skunk. He needed one with character, one with a reputation that preceded it. After all, if Karen was going to learn a lesson in humility, it would have to be delivered in a form as shocking and unignorable as her own audacity. A few days earlier, during one of his late-night research escapades on the internet, where one can stumble upon the most bizarre yet fascinating ideas, John discovered that skunks, with their potent spray, had an almost mythical status in urban legends as nature's own retribution agents. Their natural defense mechanism was, quite simply, an odor of epic proportions, an aroma so foul it could clear a room faster than Karen's glare at a disobedient neighbor. This, John mused, was precisely the weapon he needed. Armed with a resolute determination, John scoured local classified ads and quirky online marketplaces until he found his perfect match, a skunk with a promising glint in its beady eyes, which he promptly christened Stinky. In John's mind, the name was both a tribute and a harbinger of what was to come. Stinky was not just an animal. He was a symbol, a living embodiment of the justice that Karen had so long evaded. The next phase of the plan was training. Now, most people might balk at the idea of training a skunk, but John was nothing if not resourceful. Over the course of several nights, he devoted himself to teaching Stinky a few basic commands: stay, come, and most crucially, release, using a mix of irresistible treats, the kind that even the most wayward skunk couldn't resist, and a series of carefully orchestrated distractions. John slowly but surely transformed Stinky into a willing participant in this caper of cosmic irony. The training sessions were a mix of hilarity and frustration. Imagine a determined man trying to reason with a creature whose primary defense was a potent, noxious spray. Yet, amidst the chaos, a unique bond formed between the two, united by a shared purpose: to serve justice in the most unorthodox way imaginable. With his skunk comrade ready for duty, John turned his attention to the centerpiece of his plan, a contraption he would later dub the Stink Trap. The trap was nothing short of a masterpiece of amateur engineering, assembled in the secret confines of his cluttered garage. John scavenged materials from around the building: a sturdy cardboard box from the recycling bin near the mailroom, some spare duct tape, and a couple of springs pilfered from an old, discarded exercise machine. He fashioned the box into a deceptively innocuous package, complete with a false, fragile sticker and a neatly taped label that read, "Special Delivery." The genius of the trap lay in its simplicity. Inside the box, John had installed a mechanism that, when triggered by the unsuspecting hands of a recipient, would release Stinky in a controlled burst of, well, Stinky's natural weapon. The idea was that when Karen, ever so predictably, went to claim what she presumed was yet another ordinary package and an opportunity to add to her ill-gotten collection, the trap would spring into action. It wasn't just a prank. It was a carefully calculated moment of retributive justice. In preparation for the grand execution, John spent days meticulously positioning the trap in the most strategic location possible, right outside the package pickup area, where Karen was known to frequent. He knew her routine with near-perfect precision, how she would glide through the corridor with that self-satisfied smirk, her gloved hands clutching her latest acquisition as if it were a trophy. The trap had to be placed in a spot that maximized the chance of an encounter, and John's intuition, honed by weeks of covert observation, led him to the perfect nook near the elevator lobby. Of course, no plan is complete without a touch of theatrical flair. John couldn't resist imagining the scene. Karen, with her trademark haughtiness, approaching the box with the same careless confidence she'd displayed time and again. The irony was deliciously palpable. Here was a woman who prided herself on her impeccable taste and indisputable right to every package she deemed fit for her, about to be confronted by a package unlike any other. The very thought sent a thrill of anticipation through John's veins. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than John had anticipated. It was a particularly crisp morning, the kind where the air itself seemed to hum with the promise of something monumental. John, hiding behind a strategically placed potted plant, which he later admitted was not the best camouflage but served its purpose, watched with bated breath as Karen made her predictable entrance. Dressed in her usual impeccable ensemble, she moved with the same air of entitlement that had defined her every action thus far. As Karen approached the package pickup area, her eyes caught sight of the new delivery, sitting innocuously on the floor. It was a package like any other, a neatly wrapped box with a label that read "Special Delivery" in bold, inviting letters. For a moment, she paused, a flicker of curiosity crossing her face. In that instant, John's heart raced with excitement, his mind echoing the absurdity of the moment. Little did she know that curiosity was about to be met with a pungent dose of reality. Karen, never one to shy away from what she perceived as a prized possession, picked up the package with a flourish. The trap's mechanism was primed to release Stinky at the slightest hint of mishandling. And as soon as Karen's gloved fingers tugged at the tape, a soft click resonated from within the box. It was a sound so subtle yet so laden with consequence that even the faintest breeze seemed to pause in anticipation. Then, in an instant that felt both suspended and inevitable, the box sprang open. Out leaped Stinky, his tiny eyes wide with a mix of confusion and readiness, followed by a sudden, powerful burst of spray that filled the corridor with an odor so foul it could only be described as an olfactory affront to decency. The air turned thick, and for a split second, time itself seemed to recoil from the stench. Karen's face, previously painted with smug satisfaction, contorted into a mask of shock and horror. In that moment, the embodiment of entitlement was rendered utterly powerless by a force as natural as it was repulsive. The ensuing chaos was nothing short of cinematic. Karen, now a hapless victim of her own hubris, sputtered and waved her arms in a vain attempt to escape the relentless assault of odor. Residents who had been casually going about their day found themselves caught in a maelstrom of laughter, disbelief, and, admittedly, a fair bit of disgust. It was as if the universe had conspired to deliver poetic justice in the form of a skunk spray, a fitting punishment for someone who had long believed that she was above the rules of common decency. John, watching from his hiding spot, couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The trap had worked perfectly, turning a simple package theft into a grand spectacle of retributive hilarity. Here was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of entitlement, now humbled by a creature whose only ambition was to defend itself with a power that was both natural and indisputable. The irony was rich, a reminder that even the most arrogant among us could be brought low by forces entirely beyond their control. In the aftermath, as the smell gradually dissipated and the residents began to regain their composure, the message was as clear as it was pungent. The Regency residences had witnessed not just an act of petty revenge but a masterclass in satire, a demonstration that the scales of justice need not always be balanced by bureaucracy or legal proceedings. Sometimes they could be tipped by a clever man, a determined skunk, and a trap that was as ingenious as it was unexpected. John's plan, with all its eccentricities and technical mishaps along the way, had become the catalyst for a turning point in the building's dynamics. Neighbors, once resigned to Karen's unbridled entitlement, now saw a glimmer of hope that fairness might yet prevail. And as for Karen, the shock of that fateful encounter would serve as a lasting reminder that no one, no matter how self-assured, was immune to the consequences of their actions. Thus, in a display of both creativity and righteous indignation, John had set in motion a chain of events that would not only reclaim his lost dignity, but also spark a broader conversation about the absurdity of unchecked privilege. The day of reckoning had finally arrived, a moment that the residents of the Regency residences had been silently anticipating like the climax of a dark comedy. Karen, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside her perfectly polished door, was in for a shock that would shake the very foundation of her self-proclaimed empire of entitlement. It was a bright, crisp morning when Karen returned to her upscale apartment, a pristine slice of modern design that she adored as much as she adored her own reflection. Clad in her signature designer outfit and armed with an air of unassailable superiority, she strolled through the hallways with her usual confident gait. The corridors, still recovering from the pungent uproar of the previous night's escapade, seemed to whisper in anticipation as if they too were in on the secret of the impending downfall. Karen's personal domain was immaculate, every detail curated to perfection. The gleaming hardwood floors, the tastefully minimalist decor, and the strategically placed awards, self-commissioned, naturally, all bore testimony to her belief in her own infallibility. Today, however, would mark the first time that her infallibility was called into question. On the doorstep of her lavish apartment lay a new delivery, a package that, by all outward appearances, promised another opportunity for Karen to display her exquisite taste. It was unremarkable in every sense, neatly wrapped in standard brown paper, secured with a pristine layer of tape, and adorned with a bold label that read, "Special Delivery." Unbeknownst to Karen, this was no ordinary package. Concealed within its deceptively mundane exterior was John's meticulously crafted stink trap, a device engineered to deliver a lesson in humility, courtesy of his unlikely accomplice, Stinky the Skunk. The trap had been designed to activate the moment the package was opened, unleashing a potent, unmistakable spray that would not only mar Karen's prized possessions, but also her carefully constructed image of superiority. As Karen set the package on her entry table, she admired it with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. In her mind, each delivery was a trophy, a tangible symbol of her right to claim what the universe had so graciously bestowed upon her. With a smug smile playing on her lips, she reached for the tape with the practiced ease of someone who believed that everything in her life adhered to a predetermined order of perfection. The moment her gloved fingers peeled away the tape, a soft, almost imperceptible click resonated from within the box. For a split second, nothing happened. Then, as if time itself had decided to play a cruel joke on her, the box burst open. Out of the package sprang Stinky, the once docile skunk now fully alerted and, in that instant, unleashing a spray so powerful that the very air in the room seemed to recoil in disgust. The transformation was instantaneous. Karen's expression, which had been one of smug satisfaction, twisted into a grotesque mask of horror and disbelief. Her eyes widened, and a choked gasp escaped her lips as the pungent miasma engulfed her. The room, once an oasis of refined aesthetics, was instantly overrun by a cloud of putrid odor, a stench that defied all attempts at description. It was as though nature itself had decided to mete out a dose of poetic justice. In the ensuing chaos, Karen flailed about like a character in a slapstick comedy. She banged against her walls, her designer heels clacking against the marble floor as she attempted, in vain, to escape the relentless assault of the odor. The fragrance of her downfall was both overwhelming and inescapable, transforming her once pristine abode into a battleground of sensory warfare. Every breath was a reminder of the cosmic irony at play, a relentless, natural force that refused to be ignored. Outside, the residents of the Regency residences gathered at the entrance, their initial shock giving way to raucous laughter and incredulous murmurs. Windows were opened, and from every vantage point, the spectacle was met with a mixture of amusement and triumphant vindication. For too long, they had endured Karen's tyranny of entitlement, watching as she paraded her ill-gotten trophies with an air of unassailable grandeur. Now, at last, the tables had turned. John, watching from a safe distance, allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. His plan had worked flawlessly. The trap had not only ensnared Karen in its aromatic clutches, but it had also transformed her into an unwitting symbol of the very injustice she had so often perpetuated. The once mighty queen of the corridor was now reduced to a pitiable figure, scrambling to regain control over her rapidly deteriorating domain. As minutes turned into what felt like an eternity, Karen's frantic efforts to mitigate the fallout grew increasingly desperate. She scurried about, dousing herself with every available aerosol, air fresheners, cleaning sprays, even a bottle of her own expensive perfume, hoping against hope that she might mask the relentless stench. But nothing could overpower the raw, unfiltered power of nature's retribution. Each attempt only compounded the irony. The very products designed to enhance her sense of self only served to highlight the chaotic, ungovernable forces that now ruled her apartment. News of the incident spread quickly through the building, and soon every resident was abuzz with the details of Karen's olfactory debacle. In hushed tones and over animated whispers, they recounted the spectacle with an enthusiasm that bordered on the theatrical. "Did you see her face when the package opened?" one resident exclaimed, barely able to contain his amusement. "It was priceless," another added, shaking his head in disbelief. The incident had become a rallying cry for those who had long suffered under Karen's haughty reign. A tangible, if slightly pungent, victory over the forces of entitlement. In the days that followed, Karen's downfall continued to be the subject of endless conversation. Social media channels within the building erupted with memes and satirical posts, each one capturing the absurdity of the situation in vivid detail. In every post, the message was unmistakable. No amount of self-importance could shield one from the consequences of one's actions. Karen, who had once ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove, was now the unwilling star of a cautionary tale that had spread like wildfire. The building's HOA meetings, once dominated by Karen's domineering rhetoric, took on a markedly different tone. Neighbors, emboldened by the recent turn of events, began to speak up about the need for fairness and accountability. The once impenetrable aura of Karen's entitlement was slowly but surely eroded by the collective voice of the community. It was as if the very air, still tinged with a faint, lingering note of that fateful spray, had infused everyone with the courage to stand up for their rights. In these meetings, amid the humorous jabs and clever quips, the underlying message was clear. The era of unchecked privilege was over. For Karen, the road to recovery was steep and littered with public humiliation. Her attempts to reclaim her former dignity were met with skeptical glances and subtle, yet biting remarks. Every time she ventured into the common areas of the building, residents exchanged knowing looks, a silent reminder of the day when nature itself had delivered justice. The once proud figure of Karen was now a living parable, a reminder that even the most arrogant among us can be humbled by the unpredictable forces of life. In the final analysis, Karen's dramatic downfall served as a powerful allegory for the dangers of unchecked entitlement. Through the cleverly executed machinations of one determined man and a very determined skunk, the community of the Regency residences had witnessed a masterclass in retributive justice. John's ingenious plan, executed with precision and a healthy dose of satirical humor, had not only restored the balance of power, but had also ignited a spark of camaraderie among the residents. The message was clear. In a world that often seemed governed by absurdity and injustice, even the smallest creature could become the harbinger of change. As the days passed and the memory of that fateful package began to fade, the legacy of the incident endured. It was a story that would be recounted with laughter and disbelief for years to come, a testament to the power of creative rebellion and the enduring truth that no one, no matter how self-important, was above the natural order of justice. And so, in the annals of the Regency residences, the chapter of Karen's aromatic downfall became more than just a humorous anecdote. It was a clarion call to all who dared to flaunt entitlement without consequence. For in the end, justice, however unorthodox and pungent in its methods, always had a way of finding those who believed they were untouchable.